religions of the past were awaiting the coming of two great beings in the end times. To the Jews, the coming of Elijah and the Lord of hosts. To the Christians, the return of Christ and Elijah. To the Muslims, the coming of the Mahdi and Christ. And to others, the coming of the Messiah and Elijah. But to the Baha'is, it has been fulfilled in His Holiness, the Bab, the Forerunner, and Baha'u'llah, the Prophet founder of the Baha'i faith. Prominent in these prophecies of the coming of the Messiah in the end time, and the end of the world, is the year 1844. By the year 1453, Christianity was divided into three divisions: the Roman Catholics, the Protestant, and the Greek Orthodox Catholics. And the Greek Orthodox Catholics' capital of Constantinople fell to the Turks, the Muslims, and the scholars consider that to be the fulfillment of the prophecies in Revelation 9 verse 15, which state that the slaying of 1/3 of the men of truth, we have prepared an hour, a day, a month, and a year. A year is 360 days. A month is 30 days, and a day put together makes 391 days, which are 391 years according to prophecies. For in the book of Number 14 verse 34 state, a day to the Lord is 1 year. So if we add 391 years to 1453, it brings us to 1844, the year they say that the Messiah will come and the end of time. In the Old Testament, it tells the story of how God warned the Israelites to be obedient. If they are not obedient, they will be punished 7 times. And they were not obedient. Leviticus 26 verse 28 state, I will chastise you 7 times. I will make your city waste, and I will scatter you among the heathens. 7 times is 7 years. Multiply by 360 days in a year equals 2,520 days, which are 2,520 years according to prophecies. The first captivities of Judah happened on 677 BC, and from 677 to the birth of Christ is 676. Take away 676 from 2,520, it equals 1844, the year they say that the Messiah will come and the end of time. In Daniel 7 verse 25, it states that the coming of the Messiah in the end time followed a time and times and a dividing of times. The same prophecies mentioned in Daniel 12 verse 7, but slightly different wording. The coming of the Messiah in the end time followed a time and times and a half. Time is a year. Time and times and a half is 3.5 years. Multiplied by 360 days in a year equals 1260 days, which are 1260 years according to prophecies. But these are lunar years. because the calendar of the East at the time is a lunar calendar. And it equates to 1844 of the solar calendar of the West. These two dates are matched. You can even match them mathematically. 1260 multiplied by 354 days in a lunar year equals 446,040. Divide by 365 days in a solar year equals 1222. Islam started in 622. You add 1222 to 622, it equals 1844. These two dates match perfectly. In the book of Matthew 24 tells the story of Christ set on Mount Olive, and the apostle came to him and asked, "What are the signs of your coming and of the end of the world?" In his answer, he gave three promises. One is when the gospel is preached unto all the world as a witness. Second, you will fall by the edge of the sword, and you will be led away captives and scattered all over the world until the time the Gentiles end, and you will return to the Holy Land. And the third is when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet that stand in the holy place, let him read, understand the vision. The first promise, according to the scholars, was fulfilled in 1844, when the gospel finally reached inside of the continent of Africa, and on April 1844, and the big organization, missionary organizations of the British Missionary Society and the American Missionary Society together have more than 1,000 preachers that were active in preaching the gospel at that time. They made a public combined declaration that the first promise of Christ was fulfilled in 1844, when the gospel finally reached the inner part of Africa on April 1844. The second promise, you will fall by the edge of the sword, and you will lead away captives and scatter all over the world, is what literally did happen to the Jews, until the time the Gentile ends and you will return to the Holy Land. The Gentiles were the power and forces that conquer and rule Jerusalem. The first Gentiles were the Romans, and the second and last were the Muslims. The Muslims conquered Jerusalem in 637 AD, and they ruled for over 1,000 years, and they ruled with an iron fist. For Jews to return to the Holy Land under their rule was punishable by death. And as the Bible said, they would tread underfoot the holy city for 42 months. 42 months is 360 days. For 42 months multiplied by 30 days in a month equals 1260 days, which are 1260 years according to prophecies. These are lunar years because the calendar of the Muslims was a lunar calendar, and it equates to 1844 of the solar calendar of the West. It was in this year, 1844, on the 21st of March, a treaty was signed called the Edict of Toleration, to allow freedom of religions in the Holy Land, and virtually to allow the Jews to return to the Holy Land after more than 1,000 years of being led away captives. And the treaty was signed by Turkey and Britain. Why Turkey and Britain? Turkey was the headquarters of the Islamic Caliphate of the Ottoman Empire that ruled Jerusalem at the time. And Britain became the protectorate of Palestine at the time. All the scholars agreed that the second promise of Christ have been fulfilled in the signing of the Edict of Toleration. The third promise, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet that stand in the holy place, is the chapters of Daniel that deal with this promise are chapters 8 to 14 inclusive. Not only it tells us about the second coming of Christ, but also his first coming. In Daniel 9 verse 24 state, from the rebuilding of Jerusalem to the martyrdom of Christ, we have appointed 70 weeks. 70 weeks multiplied by 7 days in a week equals 490 days, which are 490 years according to prophecies. The edicts to rebuild Jerusalem was issued by 3 kings. First by King Cyrus in 536 BC, and it went unfulfilled. The second by King Darius in 519 BC, and it went unfulfilled. And the third by King Artaxerxes in 457 BC, and the fourth by the same King Artaxerxes in 444 BC, and it fulfilled and completed the rebuilding of Jerusalem. And Daniel is referring to the 457 edict issued by Artaxerxes. Christ was said to be 33 years old when he was crucified. You add 33 to 457, it equals 490. Exactly the year they say that Christ will be martyred. This is about the first coming of Christ. Let's find out his second coming. In Daniel 8 verse 13 it states, "Then I heard one of the saints speaking, and another saint said to the certain one that spoke, 'How long is the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give the sanctuary and host to be trodden underfoot?' And he answered, 'Unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed.'" The 2,300 days are 2,300 years, according to prophecies. From the decree or from the edict to rebuild Jerusalem of Artaxerxes of 457 to the birth of Christ is 456. Take away 456 from 2,300, it equals 1844. Exactly the year they say that Messiah will come and the end of time. In this year, His Holiness the Bab declared his mission on the 23rd of May in Shiraz, Elam, the ancient name of Persia. And he said he comes to prepare the way for the coming of him whom God shall make manifest, a reference to Baha'u'llah. And he said he will come quickly after him. He was executed by a firing squad at a public square in Tabriz on the 9th of July, 1850. And just 2 years after that, his martyrdom, Baha'u'llah received his revelation in 1852 in a Siyachal, an underground dungeon where he was held. And then he was exiled to Babylon, the ancient name of Baghdad, Iraq, where he publicly declared his mission on 1863. And he was exiled further by the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire and eventually reached the Holy Land, Israel. And he passed away there and is interred in the vicinity of Mount Carmel, the mountain of God, where his forerunner, His Holiness the Bab, is interred. And the mountain that the Israeli prophets of old said it will be glorified and purified by the footsteps of the Lord of hosts in the end times, which literally fulfilled when His Holiness Baha'u'llah walked on Mount Carmel and showed to Abdu'l-Baha where the spot on the mount where the shrine of his forerunner, His Holiness the Bab, and where he's going to be interred. You can see all these prophecies were undoubtedly clear that were fulfilled by the Bab and Baha'u'llah. Hence our humble encouragement to you to submerge yourself in the ocean of Baha'u'llah's teachings and writings. Lie in the depths of that ocean are pearls of wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. They have the power and potency to influence your soul, though you may not at first realize it. Thank you, and I wish you well. Whaftai lava, manuela wha whongwhongai mula wha sausaunga Samoa. Soifua.